Hello, everyone, and welcome to watching another episode of Honestly About Anxiety. This is actually a third episode out of a series of nine, so make sure you're going to watch all the nine episodes to get the full review of everything. And today's guest is Joshua. Hi, Joshua.
Hi, Pierrette. It's very nice to be here. Thanks for allowing me to be on this special episode of Anxiety.
Yeah, it's with your story, this is going to be really personal story because you have a lot of personal experience of how you actually got in control, and I would say you in control of anxiety now, right?
Yeah,
Like, I don't
definitely.
think people can like completely eliminate it because even like I'm in like really good control, but sometimes it's even like starts a little bit, but now I know like acknowledge when it starts a little bit and then I can stop.
Yeah,
So
you never really get rid of anxiety, but if you learn how to control the anxiety, it makes a big difference.
yeah, and that's what I like the viewers. That's your goal. Your goal is to learn to control your anxiety and not to like hide from it or anything like this, but just be relaxed and calm when it arrives and just talk through it. So I'll let Joshua to start with introducing himself.
Thanks, Pierrette. So, my name is Joshua Smith. I actually live in Pennsylvania, United States, and I've been a coach for a number of months now. Just started my new business called Your Speaking Voice, which is based in South Central Pennsylvania. And I'm helping people realize their voice in this world. So, really to help them not only on the personal side, but also professional as well. So, I do a lot of different speaking engagements, coaching, and I also have a longer term job right now, but I'm hoping to expand a little bit more. But it's always a privilege to talk about my experiences and even my story because it's so important to what I do.
Yes, it is. Okay, well, your personal story with anxiety was how many years ago now? Was your really
So,
the
yeah,
moment?
yeah, that's a very loaded question because we could start from 3 years ago to when I was born. We can go that far away, which was 36 years ago. So, I'll give you the 3 years ago version because I think it will help our audience a little bit if you don't mind.
Yeah, but it really started from when you were like born. You would think like you were born as the kid with anxiety. You were as a kid you were had anxiety already.
I did. And Pirat, I gotta tell you that sometimes for people that go through life that often don't have the best role models or mentors, sometimes that anxiety that we have in ourselves can be overwhelming. You see, growing up as a kid, I was always teased quite a lot about my weight because I've always struggled with being overweight, still do to this day. I'm still working on that. That's something that I'm always trying to achieve. But I was always worried about what other people thought of me, and I was trying to get their validation. So I lived in a constant state of anxiety because I would almost have these glasses on, these rose-colored glasses saying, do they like me over there? And I'm like looking
Mhm.
all the way over the other side of the room because I see them staring at me like I was some sort of monster or somebody that just didn't understand what their lifestyle was like, or they didn't want to understand who I was. So it really originated from that, but it grew only worse as I got older because I felt that as people were saying to me, you need to do this, you need to do that, not only
Mhm.
from work, but some of the friendships that I did have that were very limited, I still felt like there was this set of eyes staring at me, almost as if there was an expectation or monitoring of me to make sure that I was doing what I said I was going to do. So that anxiety manifested itself over and over and over again. I would be at home and, in the middle of the night, laying in my
Mhm.
bed, and all of a sudden, I just have this overwhelming fear of panic and
Mhm.
frustration because I'm was constantly thinking, like, at 3 a.m. in the morning,
Mhm.
"Oh, I wonder what that person thought of me." And it might have happened, like, 3 days
Mhm.
ago. It might have happened 3 years ago. But I felt that I was always internalizing something as a result of just overanalyzing what people thought about me, what I thought I was doing a good job. I was always, like, looking at, "Okay, did I do what they said they need me to do? Was I always doing what I needed them to have me do?" Like, there was always this constant back and forth, and I just was never really satisfied. So that's what generates so much, not just anxiety, but also depression, because when I was 13, I was seeing my family doctor, and they started prescribing a whole bunch of different medicines, Effexor and all kinds of over-the-counter drugs that they
Mhm.
were supposed to reduce that depression, reduce that panicky feeling, but
Mhm.
nothing ever worked. I always felt sick in my stomach, things of that nature. But
Yeah, I think all those medicines and though that just like pill like medicine as a chemical, that just covers it.
yeah,
So
it
as
was
soon as like the medicine wears out, it's all back. So because I know that I would say medicine that will help if you also work on like mentally and therapy and like just talking about controlling breath work or something additional holistic view of it beside only the medicine.
Yeah, and that's the whole key to medicine, is that it isn't just to be the one-stop shop to fix everything. And I always felt like my doctors were always saying, "Oh yeah, this is going to help you and take care of you." And they're telling my parents, "Yeah, that will take care of Josh. He'll be all right." But
Mhm.
it wasn't. It was actually just masking all the different things that were happening. I wasn't treating the ultimate source, which was, why was I having these thoughts? Why
Okay.
was I overcompensating by having all these different people think that I needed to take this and do this or do that? It just was a vicious cycle.
Mhm. And how did you start to understand why?
It started when about 3 years ago, I started to
Okay.
figure out why.
Let's talk about the 3 years ago now.
Yeah. So as I was going through the different things in my life with transitioning from just being at a better job and being able to do volunteer work, which I enjoy doing. One of the things I love doing is actually helping other people with public speaking. This was before I started
Mhm.
my business and get paid to do that now. Um, I had this overwhelming feeling one day. I was like, what's going on? I just don't, I felt off. And here, I was starting to have a mental breakdown. You see, all those years of having those thoughts about myself finally took its toll, and I literally had got so scared about what that feeling was, Pirat, I actually tried to end my life.
Yeah.
And I remember that day because there's a couple things about that day. First off, it was the day before my 33rd birthday, so right before my birthday.
Right the day what the day before.
Yeah,
Was
the
it
day
morning
before.
or nighttime before the day?
It
Like,
was it was literally, like, 24 hours before, the day of, and
but
so,
was it like a nighttime or morning time or daytime?
so it started in the morning, and then it came to like, a head in the evening, so at night, that's when it really picked up. So,
Okay.
yes.
But did you when you woke up in the morning, did you already have some kind of thoughts in your head that were worrying you or it started later?
So, that's a great question, and not many people, when I've talked about my story, even on other shows, have, asked that question. I didn't really feel that way, to be honest with you. I felt like any other normal day the day before that. I felt that
Okay.
things were going okay. I knew that I had a routine down. Everything was just fine. But
Mhm.
it seemed like maybe there was some sort of chemical reaction or brain sort of thought
Okay.
was planted the night before when I got up, and it made me feel the way I did. And I often wonder if it was because I was ignoring or masking the anxiety that was happening in my life.
Okay.
So to continue, so I started going through my day, the day before my birthday, just thinking, yeah, I'm pushed through, everything's okay. But I just started to feel like there was these bricks happening. So all these different things that were occurring in my life, the expectations of friends, the expectation of boss, expectation of you name it, you fill in the blank. That was sort of what I was feeling. And I felt it more in my chest than anything else. And I was like, I
Okay.
can't have this feeling. I tried everything. And like by that point in my life, I've had so many different medications. I refused to see a therapist because I thought I can handle this. And that's usually because males, masculinity, yeah, I'm tough. I can figure this out.
Mhm.
But I don't. I couldn't. And I just broke down. And I remember laying on the living room floor. And keep in mind, I lived with my landlord. My landlord knew nothing about this going on
Okay.
in his back room, and I was just a complete mess. I was crying. I was telling other people on social media, "I'm gonna end it. I'm gonna end it. I'm gonna end it." Well, someone decided, "No, you're not. I'm gonna save you." They called the police.
Okay.
And that was the day where I was whisked away to a hospital. I was observed for 72 hours. And that was the thought process. So instead of having medicine where we think that that was going to be the end all be all that will solve everything, it
Mhm.
was actually changing my mindset. And
Mhm.
that is what is really important for anybody that's ever going through this is not always hitting the play button on the same recording over and over again saying, "You're never gonna overcome this. You're never gonna overcome this. You are going to be worthless," is actually changing the mindset of the negative thinking into positive thinking. And
Mhm.
that's what started me on my journey to getting to where I'm at now, which correct. If I could tell you that there was an old Josh that was suffering from that just time and time again to somebody that was now seeing that true light inside themselves because they were free of having that anxiety happen in their lives, it it was really that moment. And it wasn't overnight because I still struggled off and on, but I started talking to people and I started talking to a therapist that helped me to see that, yeah, you've been playing this recording over and over again. Why are you
Yes.
doing that? That's what's causing this anxiety. So
Mhm.
that's really helped me to get to where I'm at today.
I think a lot of people they view it like they need one day solution. Like they're looking for like, oh, I need this quick resolution. But I'm telling you, it's practice. And people ask like, how do I stay calm? How do I always feel happy? It didn't just come like that. I practiced and I practiced and I practiced and I practiced and I talked with those limiting thoughts and limiting beliefs, and I was able to like now they don't bother me anymore at all. But I remember when I started, it's still like they came in my head and I thought paused and I acknowledged them and I realized that I talked with them, limited them since they were like most of the thoughts were just completely nonsense. So I told myself, I even told myself, this is completely stupid. There's no reason for me to think like that. Kind of,
And
yeah.
it's yeah, I was going to say it's really about there's two things that I think is always important to think about with this. It's the inner voice that we have inside of ourselves. So it's the inner critic that's always saying, "Man, what? Why are we doing that? That's just ridiculous." But
Hmm.
we kind of ignore that and we put it off, and that's what I was doing quite a lot. Is oh, I'm gonna put it on my bookshelf behind me, and I'm just gonna visit it another time when I'm ready. Well, I always was saying that. That was always my excuse. But the second thing is that you said that I think is really important is it's about we have to go through this lifelong process of just continuing to examine and sometimes stopping and just for a brief period of time relaxing and just
Hmm.
realizing that sometimes having that instant gratification that we think that we're just going to turn things right around, it's not going to happen that way all
Yeah.
the time. It can work for the short term, but eventually it will catch up to you where you are going so fast that those things that we often put off, we think that we're going to get done, they're going to catch up to us. And that's why for the longest time, I never had meaningful relationships, not just romantically, but also with friends too, because
Friends.
I was always thinking about, well, what are they thinking about me? Why am I feeling the way I am? It's because I never stopped to say, oh, that's why. So we have to
Hmm.
do a little bit of self examination when it comes to that.
Hmm. I have, in my mindset, I grew up as a kid, I didn't have sometimes I had this feeling of like, what are they thinking about me or what I think? But I being the one that kind of since beginning had the opportunity to think, do I like them?
Yeah.
I always had this approach, and that's for the viewers. Instead of thinking, do they like you? Try to approach like you want people in your life who you like. So
And
you have to change. You have to change, and you try to find those people that you like. Not worry about the people who don't like you, but try to find people that you like and have more of them in your life if possible. And that was my
I,
thing. I was like always like I approach people with this thing, this mindset like, do I like them? Are they nice people? Do I want them in my life?
and I find that so important to your listeners and even people listening to this because it is sometimes very hard to say. And have a client right now in my business that is literally going through this process of what are these people actually supporting me? Are they actually helping me to see who I really can become? And I had to go through that exercise myself. Literally, I would say even in the last few months, as I'm still a work in progress with this, I go on my social media and I say, are these people adding value to me that should be adding value? Or are they just here to tag along and make me feel worthless? And should I
Mhm.
remove them? So I've done a lot of purging. I've also done a lot of connecting because I think it's really important to forgive and forget of what is really happening with maybe some shortfalls that we've had happen in our lives. So being able to
Mhm.
examine that, even if you set out just a small chunk of it per day, you don't have to do it all at once, but if you do a small piece of it, it makes such a big difference in how you think, how you interact, and you know that you're being supported by the right people. So I can't agree with you more on that.
Mhm. That is true. And like you're saying, forgiving is really important the way I see as well. And but I learned really cool thing from I'm a mom, but I learned also another really cool thing from another mom, and she teached her kids that you say instead of just saying when somebody makes another kid, some mom makes another kid to say I'm sorry, for your kid to say it's okay, you say it's okay, but then they also gonna say, but don't do it again.
Yeah.
So I made like that's a really big this things like you forgive, you say it's okay, but you're also gonna confront them then, but don't do it again.
And I have people in my life that I have seen this happen with where they do correct their children. I don't have any children myself, so I get to see it at least
Mhm.
from a parent aspect from other people's eyes and how they treat them. I love the parents though that say to them, okay, this is what you're not supposed to do, but this is why you shouldn't do that. And
Mhm.
giving context. So, and even what we're talking about too with anxiety, this is why your words hurt because they might fill that person with anxiety, with fear, with
Mhm.
the unknown of wanting to try something because you are saying these wrong, hateful things. And I feel like we say that to our kids, but we need to start saying that to adults
Yeah.
sometimes too
Mhm.
and even ourselves because I think we sometimes forget that we need to unleash the ability to just have that open conversation, but to be respectful about it because
Mhm.
sometimes we're not even aware of what we're actually doing. And I am guilty of that so much that sometimes I even journal about why I let this bother me or why I let that person get inside of me to create that feeling of insecurity, angst, and all kinds of other emotions. It's just about detailing not only what it is that you're feeling, but why it's a consequence of trying to show other people why that's not the right thing to do. I think it's so important to have that two-way street.
Mhm. Because we take a lot of things that are not actually personal. We take it personally.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, guilty as charged, right? Because I have done that so many different times.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that we often don't look at not just the way in which that reaction happens, but in a way, we almost feel like we take a piece of ourselves and we leave it, right? So when we
Mm-hmm.
say our words, it's almost like emptying a basket. We folded up all the laundry because we were able to do that task. Great. Well, we gave that laundry, which might be dirty now, to somebody else that has to handle it and has to deal with it. Do you want to give someone else your dirty laundry? I think that's just the visual that I walk through to make sure that people don't feel like I'm trying to disrespect them. And I think that's where when I was feeling this way when I was growing up, going back to my story a bit,
Mm-hmm.
why I felt the way I did was mainly because when those people were saying those things about what I needed to do and how I should act and how I should feel, even from my own parents, it was like, well, why? And then not getting any answers. That would
Mm-hmm.
stem the anger of just lashing out and I would bottle it up. Well,
Mm-hmm.
3 years ago would not unleash. That was not a good, healthy exchange. So we need to learn how to process those things in a much meaningful, healthy way.
Mm-hmm. That is true. And that causes so much, that is the main cause kind of anxiety. It just builds up, and it just builds up with the words in your head, and then your body starts reacting, and then it just explodes as well.
And I think that in our society, especially in schools, we need to be teaching a lot more that if parents aren't able to, and if you are a parent, for even your listeners, I think it's just important to not just have a conversation with other parents just to get an idea of how they handle it, but even more importantly, go and actually volunteer at a school or a volunteer at an event which has some kids and see how they treat each other nowadays. Whether that is even just playing with the cell phone, because I know that I've seen
Mhm.
people even doing that too, where they just don't give that level of respect. If we're able to just open our eyes to our surroundings and just be able to correct it when it happens. That's when we start to identify when those problems are occurring. That's where we teach valuable lessons of this is not what you do, but this is how you can handle it better the next time something happens.
That is true. And now we have to start from kids. I wish we were taught that when we were growing up, but thankfully now we are aware of it, so we can teach that to the next generations.
Yeah. And I think that even though we have our own childhood where we might have had not a good role model, I know for a fact that I'm probably one of those kids. Sometimes you need to have that drive. And I even say this to my clients that go through even my services. I say to them, it isn't just about what other people are saying to you. It's actually about what you view yourself as and what you're willing to do to make that change. And to be honest, there's some people that are not ready for it. And that's okay. You have to be ready for it when the time is right, and I encourage that in many people that I work with, because if you force it, it's not going to be received well, and it's not going to be accepted in what your heart is and what you truly want to become, if you ever want to make that substantial growth or change happen for that matter. So, I often say it's not just about where you want to go, but where you want to lead and how you want to create that leading effect. Because if you're not practicing it yourself, I feel that you can't ever get to that next stage in your life. And I know that it's often easier said than done. I mean, we're literally talking about the right, and
Mhm.
I feel like I'm like, whoo, man, I'm overwhelmed because I even saying it. I'm like, I don't know if I even have the confidence, even as a coach. But I think that we just have to sometimes take a step back and think about how we can be great practitioners, not only to our individuals, other people that we inspire or lead, even if that's
Mhm.
our children, but to say to ourselves, what's the extra work that I need to do so that I can continue to build so that I don't feel that level of anxiety? Because we don't want anxiety to be the force that holds us back, because
Mhm.
that was the force that held me back for so long in my life. And if it wasn't for good mentors in my life, I mean, I'll give you a perfect example real quick of somebody that has really
Mm-hmm.
done this for me, and especially as I was going through the journey that I went through. There's a
Yes.
gentleman by the name of Chris Hulse. Chris has been a longtime friend of mine, and I always make a conversation about him because of what he did for me immediately after I was released from the mental institution that I stayed at for observation. Chris actually checked in with me, whether it was a phone call or a text message, because one convenient piece that I forgot to tell you is that when this all happened, it was literally 3 weeks before the world as we knew it changed because of COVID. It
Yes.
shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was struggling through COVID with these thoughts after being through this experience, and Chris always would check in with me and say, "Hey, man, you okay? Like, do we need to talk about anything? What's bothering you?" And be like, "Yeah, man, I'm having another one of those off days. Just feel like I have these bad thoughts about myself." Like, "Oh, okay. Well, tell me about them." He would explore whether it took like a 30 minutes or if it took 2 hours every night, he would explore that with me. I can't tell you how important that was for me to just have somebody, whether they were hundreds of
Mm-hmm.
miles away, just nudging you along saying, "Get the anxiety out of you. Get the anxiety out of you. It's okay. Just talk it out." Because that was really freeing for me, especially as I had severe doubts about, man, I don't know if this is going to work. I just
Mm-hmm.
don't feel comfortable talking about my story. But it, it made me feel a lot better knowing that I'm human and that other people are human too, and we make mistakes, but it's about being able to liberate or free ourselves from that.
Mm-hmm. That is really important to have possibly person like that you can call, or they will call you. So, for the viewers, if you can be that person for somebody, or find a person some that you can call occasionally, it's also important not to overwhelm, but like once a week is good, or like when those moments when it really happens, that it's good to like outreach for that person. But like the way I say as well, and you, if you don't really have any other person like that, the least you can do, write it out.
Yes.
I say, like, if you don't have a person you can call and talk with, then the other option is write it out, because when it's just in your head, it just starts repeating thoughts and repeating thoughts. It's just like impossible to stop in the beginning, especially in the beginning of your practice. It's really hard to stop that process when the thoughts just starting to like come automatically, just nonsense thoughts, and they just try to confirm each other. And then you just have to pause and get them out of your body somehow.
It's so important for me when I was going through what I was, because one of the things that I even use as a tool, and I'm giving a shameless plug. It's not even anything that I do. It's actually something, and I know your audience probably won't see it very well, but it's called the Mind Journal. And it's something that even for myself, if you're a male, like this has some good prompts about how to actually start feeling that way. Changing that mindset, I should say. And it doesn't have to be overly difficult. It could be just a matter of a few sentences starting out so you don't feel overwhelmed. But if you do feel overwhelmed, especially if you're starting out, write everything out, because eventually it
Mhm.
will just come out of you. It will stop, and it'll be the most freeing experience. And I know, I think a lot of people think like, oh, man, I got to get a piece of paper and pen and start writing all this out. My arm's going to hurt. Like, there's always going to be an excuse to do it. There are literally free tools online that all you simply have to do is Google them, and you
Mhm.
don't have to necessarily pay for a product like I'm holding in my hand,
Mhm.
a leather bound journal, to do that. You can literally just open up a notepad document, whether you have an Apple or Windows computer, and just start typing that way. That could be the most freeing exposure of just this light that needs to be shined on those negative thoughts, especially just letting go of what is making you feel so tight around the chest. Because we have not just the physical sensation that happens, but the emotional sensation of being able to just let that go, to let that be words that we put on a piece of paper, which whether we want to keep it or not, that's totally up to us. But
Mm-hmm.
I love, and I do this sometimes, I write it up, print it out, and rip it physically. Because
Okay.
I know that that makes me feel a lot better knowing that that's not me. Like, I know I wrote this about myself, but no, I'm not. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen people even burn it. Like, they get a
Yeah,
lighter
yeah.
and
I've
literally
heard about
burn it.
burning too.
Yeah,
People
yeah,
burning.
burning is not a bad thing. Of course, please do it safely. Don't
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, don't do it around anything else that might set the house on fire if you're doing it inside, but do something that makes you feel like you're ripping that away, saying, "I'm not going to be that person. I'm not gonna be put in this anxiety-induced fear that I'm going through today."
Hmm. And not to have to understand that you don't have to believe that. It's so hard to understand that you don't have to believe that. Because like those thoughts in your mind that they seem so real, probably for people, but you have to understand they're not real. They're just thoughts, and you have to give yourself permission not to believe them.
Yes, and that is the hardest thing that anybody can ever do, so don't think that you have to do it alone too, and I
Hmm.
going back to something that you said about helping, like, checking in with people, I will freely admit, there was a period of time in my life I said, "No, I don't want your help. I don't need it." Unfortunately, in this world, there's some people that are just not ready for it, and if you hear that, it doesn't mean that they don't want you to be there, okay? Sometimes they need to have that space so that they can process it, and then they'll reach out to you when they're ready too. Sometimes some people are gonna get to that moment where they're gonna have a moment of crisis like I've been through.
Hmm.
Let professional people help out. They've been trained to do that. As a coach, I've gone through many different situations. I have been, able to go through some training myself, but it doesn't make me a therapist. It doesn't make me a psychiatrist. Those are for people that are licensed and they're board certified or even gone through some formal training of their own to get to where they're at. I always say to my clients, go to them too. This is
Yeah.
just another layer that supports you. And it's good to have that network of support to do that. So I appreciate you saying that because for the longest time in my life, I didn't have that. And that
Hmm.
was because I was living in that, oh, that person wants me to do this and I don't know if I really can do that. Yeah.
Okay, so you were actually that person 3 years ago who was not ready.
Yes.
Is that what you kind of like now? You're now saying I'm thinking about it.
Yes.
So
That
three
was the
years ago
moment.
you were not ready, and after that you were ready. So that's why that was one of the reasons I started this honesty about anxiety, because those episodes are for the people who are not ready yet. So they still in this anxiety where they trying to get to the next through that anxiety, go through the anxiety and be ready for a next step, which is my main channel is happiness with Brett. So but when they're not ready, they don't happiness is not even in their vocabulary. It's that doesn't come out in their mind. Their mind is full of anxiety. So they have to deal with that first.
They do. And I say from my own personal experience, somebody that's gone through it, and maybe your viewers might identify with this too. I have been through moments where I was always thinking, okay, if I just do this one thing and I achieve that, I'll be okay. I would do
Mm-hmm.
it, nothing would happen. So I would
Mm-hmm.
make a new goal. Okay, if I do this now, and instead of doing what I did before, it will change. I would
Mm-hmm.
do it, nothing again would happen.
Mm-hmm.
So some people have to go through that trial of by error to kind of get to where that process is. And I know that some people, even in their 80s, in their 90s, might just continue to think that way. And it's a shame. I know it is. And we have sometimes that guilt, that feeling of, man, I don't feel like I did enough. No, you did do enough. Because if you, as long as you asked and as long as you got a response from that, that's what matters. Because sometimes we don't realize the power of just simply asking. Instead of just looking at it from afar, saying that, oh, well, they're going to be okay. Well, they'll figure it out on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Don't ever assume. Just ask. Because if we don't even at least start the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
then I think that we're losing out on so much valuable time to be able to work through things that might be happening and before it's too late. Where in my situation, it was almost too late. But
Mm-hmm.
thankfully, there was people that were willing to come around me after I realized what I was doing and how
Mm-hmm.
wrong I was in thinking the way I was thinking.
Mm-hmm. That reminds me. You're right about that. That reminds me. I done mental health first aid training, and they say the same thing. Like they say, well, that's that. There's a question exactly about that. Do people, if you ask person, are you thinking about suicide? And they ask like, does it make it plant something in their head that might do it? And the answer they saying is no, because that doesn't plant it. If they already have thought about it or there's something there going on, then they will bring it up, but it's not gonna start making, because the people who not gonna ever do it, they're not gonna ever do it. But if there's any chance that that can be in their mind, then that gives them outlet to talk about it. You can
Yes.
just say like, well, even if they say like, no, I don't want to do it, but it has been in my mind. So you know that it has came in their mind. So you just keep an eye on it. So was it in your mind ever before that, occasionally or not?
I remember vividly the first time it actually came in, and what this was when I was about 13 years of age. This is when I was saying earlier
Okay.
about the doctor that was prescribing Effexor, and all those different things. I remember sitting on a bus ride going home from school, and I was a rough day. There were people again saying, "Oh, look at Josh. He's such a nerd. He's such a fatso," and all those hateful things that usually you hear as a kid. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember riding the bus, being bumpy as it is, and I'm like towards the middle of the bus itself, and it literally hit me like a baseball hitting me in the face, like hitting someone in the face. It's very painful, but it was like, whoa, I don't feel like living. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what to do with that feeling because it isn't like my parents sat down and was like, okay, you might have thoughts about suicide. So let's talk about why it's important to not have those thoughts or to
Mm-hmm.
not think negatively. No, there's nothing that prepares you as a kid to get that sort of talk. Sure, we talk about the birds and the bees when we talk
Mm-hmm.
about having, that first encounter with the opposite sex, or we talk about, yeah, this is what you should expect when you go to school, especially when you go to high school. But nothing prepared me for having a conversation with myself or even others about that. So that's why
Mm-hmm.
I was feeling this judgment again. So even
Mm-hmm.
that was judgment on me and having anxiety filled kid being able to not be able to communicate about that. So I remember that so vividly that even talking about it now, right now, just talking about it, it was like,
Mm-hmm.
I know for me, I'm not that same person, but
Mm-hmm.
we need to remember that kids are going through that, and in the studies that are being done about it, or
Mm-hmm.
it's very scary to see how many more kids have this obsession or these lingering thoughts about wanting to see what it looks like if they could try to hurt themselves. We need to start having more of those conversations that we
Yes.
have like a kid about the birds and the bees. This is what it looks like in high school. Oh, by the way, when you have this thought about yourself, this is what you should do, because
Mm-hmm.
that equips people, even little kids, with the ability to do that. And I know that sounds like it's taboo. It sounds like a stigma. It sounds like something we shouldn't be doing, but that's what got us in this in the first place by not
Yes.
talking about it.
Yeah, we do have to talk about it, and with the kids, and it has to just like not that it's like a big deal, but like what are your options? If like give that like general knowledge, what to do if that thought comes to your head,
Yes.
or to approach or something.
And to take even one step further, it isn't just about letting those that are teachers or principals know. They got a lot already on their plates. They're mandated reporters for child abuse, things of that nature. parents need to be part of that conversation as well. And I know that even with the households that we have today, it is, where we have both parents working, or we might not have a father, we might not have a mother, we might have adopted parents. I know the dynamics of how things change, but everybody has a stake in it, even those that are aiding others to make sure that they carry out what they need to do on a daily basis. We are all part of this process, and that's where we need to bring this awareness to society as a whole. That's been my mission, undertone wise, to continue to
Mm-hmm.
discuss that, because I don't even want my worst enemy to fear or have anxiety about any of this stuff. I would never wish this on another person. Even as I was going through it, I always said I never want anybody else to go through it, because this is so painful to know that you just have this internal suffering, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Mm-hmm. Did anybody ever ask you that question before that 3 years ago? Before 3 years ago, did anybody else, besides yourself, but like you having those thoughts, but there's anybody who actually asked, have you ever thought about suicide?
I remember at least one or two times, and this is actually an important lesson too. I lied about it. I was like, "Nope, I'm good. I'm all okay." But really, I wasn't okay. But there was so much time that passed to that fateful day when I was riding the school bus and a baseball hit me in the face, literally. Well, not, well, figuratively,
Yeah.
of that
Mm-hmm.
thought, but it was so much time that passed that I internalized it. So although I might have been something that I was thinking, maybe I wanted to actually do one day, I never really did it. I never really wanted to talk
Mm-hmm.
about it even. So I feel that sometimes just knowing when to ask, it's better to do it sooner rather than later, because as we process that and we think about that, that's what creates some of those, oh, that's why we're feeling the way we are. Oh, that's why we shouldn't be thinking that way. I have to caution about people that wait too long. Going back to, hey, if you see something, say something, sort of that stigma that we've learned since 9/11 here in the United States about, hey, if you see that something's going on, report it. This is what it is. We can't be afraid to have that conversation, because that's what happens. And I internalized it. That's why it took 23 years to get to where I'm at now.
Mm-hmm. And after that situation, is that when you started talking about it?
It was after what transpired 3 years ago, and I to really give a message of hope, because I kind of left it as a cliffhanger,
Yeah.
but to give a message of hope with it, this is what happened to me. I started talking about it with other people after about a year
Mm-hmm.
or so of doing it with my therapist, because I started to realize that
Mm-hmm.
speaking about it, just like how we talked about earlier about
Yep.
writing it down, was my gateway to having that total freedom to not feel like I'm always have to have the cautious eye of someone overlooking me.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something I even shared with you before we started the show. I actually found out about 6 months ago that the reason I was feeling all the way I was that it was because I was autistic.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something that started way when I was a kid, of why I was having problems socially interacting with others, why I had these conceptions of things that weren't even true. It was because I was letting my autistic qualities get the best of me. But now, being an adult, learning how I've overcome those challenges, and now learning new skills as I'm 36 years of age and I'm still continuing to learn about this myself and help myself,
Mm-hmm.
I know that there is hope out there for anybody, even if it is something that you just stumble across. I was able to find out something else about myself, Perrette, because of going through wanting to hurt myself or end my
Mm-hmm.
life. So in a way, when I reached the lowest of the lows, it allowed me to reach the highest of the highs because of my journey and what I've been able to overcome. And yes, there's still days where I come in, even in this office that I sit in, and I say, "Oh man, I'm really worried about what is going to happen today. I don't know what this person's going to say." And I sit there and I close my eyes and I have this internal dialogue. It's okay to have it. That
Yep.
means that
It's
we're
okay to have it.
naturally expressing it. But also, if I feel that way, I have now more than just that Chris Holson, my speed dial. I go and call other people that I know
Mm-hmm.
that understand what I'm going through. So I have that network. And that's what's been truly empowering for me. It's made me realize that I am becoming the best version of myself that I have ever seen in over 3 decades, soon to be four. So I'm really
Mm-hmm.
happy about that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like after you get to that point, then that story is already in the past. So that's kind of, we have to understand that things that are in the past, they happen to you, but they're not anymore reality. They already passed, and you're allowed to be this new person completely.
Yes.
You can let absolutely go of that past. That was part of your life. You learned from it, but now you're absolutely allowed to be all in this new life, new person.
You have to give yourself permission. That's
Mm-hmm.
really the first step.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Well, our time's going past really fast as well with all that great stories and information. So hopefully the viewers got a lot of it out of it as well. So don't be afraid of talking about it. If you do have any kind of, I would say to viewers, if you do have any thoughts, find somebody to talk about it. There's all kinds of free supports. I think the national line, the text message or line now is 988.
Yes, it is. I always share that with my guests, even on
Mm-hmm.
my own podcast show, because of the importance of that number. I
Yes.
have not used it, but I have heard of other people using it. It's so important to use
Mm-hmm.
988.
Yeah, and 998 is not only for like when the person, it's not only when you have suicide thoughts, it's just like even if you need to talk with somebody, or it's also when you're worried about somebody else and you want to find a way how can you help somebody else, you can call to that number as well. So that's important. So before we're gonna end, Joshua, tell us a little bit of what else you do and how people can connect with you.
Thank you, Pierre. And I want to say thank you for allowing me to be on your show. It was really cool to just be able to talk about my story, but also talk about how we can implement things that change in our lives. So thank you for that, because that's exactly what I do in my business. I am located in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. The business that I have is called Your Speaking Voice. It is a not just a public speaking sort of workshop sort of type of business, which many people think, oh, speaking voice, I mean, it must mean you do public speaking. Well, yes, I do, but I do so much more with that. I do life coaching. I help
Hmm.
people find whatever they're looking for out of their lives, whether that's something in business or professional development. I also help businesses. If you have a problem with your business, maybe there's something that you're struggling with and need to strategize with. I provide all of that. I'm a speaker. I've gone across country a few times already since I've opened. I'm open to doing virtual and person engagements. So if you want to reach out to me, you can visit my website. It's www.yourspeakingvoice.biz. Your Speaking Voice, all one word. And on there, you can learn a little bit more about me. You can schedule some time with me. I always do my first consultation, 1 hour, all for free. Get to know you, what your situation is, see if we're a good fit. Because I'm always about making sure that you can get the best. And if can't help you, I will help you find somebody that will help you as well. That's always my promise to helping other individuals. So you
Hmm.
can learn a little bit more about me on there. I also am a podcast host. I have a podcast called Speaking from the Heart, and you can find that on any podcast platform that you listen to. I'm still not yet on YouTube, so I'm hoping to get on that very soon. I'm
Hmm.
already approaching about 30 episodes with a lot more to come. But if you want to find out more about that, it's Speaking from the Heart. Each word is hyphenated at .captivate.fm. You can go check out my website there. And at some point, we're going to have everything integrated into one place so you can take a look
Hmm.
at that in the process right now. But I have on my podcast, I do two things. I have a monologue episode, and I also interview guests as well on the second episode. So I do 2 episodes a week. So if you ever want to learn more about what you can do to help yourself become the best version of who you are, don't hesitate to reach out.
Hmm. And all those links gonna be they are already in description as well. So you can get all those links in description. So Joshua, I also ask every guest, always ask at the end, I ask, and that's your personal view of what is happiness. Not what other people think what is happiness, but what is happiness just for you.
Yeah. I have been thinking about that question because knowing that I was gonna be on here, I figured that I was gonna be asked.
Okay.
Happiness to me is living a life full of not only the things that you love doing, but also you doing it to not just help yourself, but to help others. To me, happiness is about that expression of sheer joy and just being able to do something that other people love that you doing it. Plus, you're doing it for all the right reasons. So if you're not sure if you're doing it for the right reasons, that's when you ask other people. But
Oh,
I feel that a life of happiness does involve that.
okay. That's really cool. Hmm.
Yes.
And what would be name you few like maybe three things that uh things or activities, personal things that you feel happy when you do them or have
Wow.
them.
I love watching movies. As you've probably seen, there's a couple things behind me, like Captain America, and a little bit there of
Hmm.
one of my one of my shots here behind me. I love Marvel, so any that you talk my
Hmm.
ear off about Marvel and all those things, I love doing that. That makes me feel happy. I love reading. I'm always reading to learn new things, learn what's going on in the world, but more importantly, to better understand opposing viewpoints because I think that to have a great conversation, you need to understand both sides of it, especially if it's a contentious topic. But
Hmm.
more on the physical side, I am surrounded by the beauty of nature where I live, so I love hiking. The
Oh.
Appalachian Trail is literally not that far away from me where it hooks up, going all
Hmm.
the way from Maine all the way down to about where Kentucky, Georgia, all those places are. So I have the beauty of being able to hike that from time to time too. So that's always my physical pastime.
Hmm. That sounds awesome.
Yes.
Okay, we had a really good episode as well, and hopefully viewers got a lot of out of it. Watch all the other episodes as well. There's 9 episodes altogether, so watch all of them. Make sure. And Joshua, thank you so much. Thank you for your story. Thank you for sharing. And bye, everyone. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
for watching.
thank you.
Thank you.